Okay, let's rethink this. So, Brigitte Gabriel, is one of her names, asks the question, why do people still wear masks on planes? And why this is a problem is difficult to fathom, but here we go. The simple answer is we've known for a long time that you put a bunch of people in a big metal tube, a bunch of breathing people, because they're alive, you have a good chance of getting sick, getting a cold, getting some sort of bacteria, you name it. There's some sort of gunk coming out of people's faces because that's the way humans breathe. More on that later. So, have you ever heard of the product Airborne? It came out in 1999 and it got in a little bit of trouble for claiming that it could handle a common cold. And I want to talk about common sense. And this is part of the epistemic stance that people have. Their common sense usually keeps them from understanding science because science regularly trumps common sense, even for people who voted for Trump. And common sense tells you that vitamin C will cure or at least help the common cold. Okay. And reality demonstrates that for the most part, it doesn't. Um, Probably, I think it's something like at least 30 some studies involving 11,000 or more people. Basically, if you take vitamin C all the time, you're going to possibly get a 10% reduction in how long your cold lasts. It will not keep you from getting a cold. And if you catch a cold and then start taking it, it's too late. That's reality. That's the data. That's how your body actually works. So this idea that Airborne as a product would keep you from getting a cold, um, it was false, and they had to pay millions of dollars to do that. But everybody knew. I knew at the time, uh, uh, and I was wrong. My common sense was wrong, and so this is one problem that you have. With social media, is non-experts um, professing expert level ideas. And it's perfectly natural because common sense is so easy to embrace, but it's almost always wrong when it comes to matters of science, which a lot of things are matters of science. Now, Brigitte is an ardent, faithful, cultic Trump supporter. You should see some of the goofy art of Trump as George Washington or looking like Rambo and how he's gonna save America. It is mind-numbing. You want to believe that it's, a fake account, but she's for real, and, that's interesting. Maybe, some other time. But science trumps common sense, even if you voted for Trump. All right. And so here I want to talk about the physics of airborne virus transportation. And this is within my wheelhouse as a physics professor. Um, don't care much about the virology of it because that's irrelevant to the physical transport mechanism of aerosols. So, quick study on this: your respiratory tract from mouth to lung is basically a resonance tube and it's lined with mucus, which is mostly water, okay? And then the goo, all right? Snot, basically, various forms of snot. And there's this thin mucus film that lines your respiratory tract. And right now I'm talking, which means that respiratory tract is vibrating. And if you had predator vision, it would look like I'm smoking. But you can't see that in normal everyday life. If it's cold outside, you can kind of see that foggy breath thing, and that's because the hot, humid aerosols coming out of your pie hole instantly cool and you get that condensation effect. So you're not really seeing the aerosols, you're seeing the aerosols take on water, and then they're more visible. And so that is all this vibration that's happening in your respiratory tract is breaking up that thin film, and then the exhalations, the exhaled air or CO2 that you are emitting is carrying all of those particles, whatever's in you. If you have the cold in you, then you're spitting out cold particles that other people are going to breathe in and possibly catch the cold or catch the coronavirus or catch pneumonia or get pneumonia, I guess. There's all these viruses that could be in your body, bacteria, and you're emitting them. And for most of our lives, we didn't notice or care because the common cold or the flu was about as bad as it gets. Then in turn of the century, we get SARS-1, not as bad as SARS-2, yada yada. You know the history, all right? And we're going to have SARS-3 in the next 5 to 10 years, or something else, maybe both. It's the nature of nature to keep producing these viruses. It's called evolution. And as long as you got more than 100 million susceptible hosts, evolution's going to win. It's going to beat your vaccines, going to beat all your efforts. Okay. However, if we'd all worn N95s for a month or so, we would have ended the pandemic in 2021. More on that later. But, anyways, you exhale this. All right. And so you can't really stop that unless you stop people from breathing. And so on a plane, guess what people are doing? They're breathing. Now, do planes have good air quality? You bet they do. They're doing about 28 to 30 air changes per hour, which means every 2 minutes or less, 63% of the air was moved out and fresh air came in, which means in just a few minutes, you have replaced all of the air. Okay, so 5 to 10 minutes into that starting, 100% of the air is fresh air. Okay. But you have 100 or more people crammed into a tiny tube with that little nozzle air thing blowing on their face. If the plane's moving, usually when you're sitting there boarding and deboarding, those things are off. And so that humongous air change effect not happening. The HEPA, high efficiency particulate airborne filtration, stuff that was invented for the Manhattan Project, right? So that people wouldn't breathe in radioactive particles. Yeah, it's some old tech. It works fantastically if you push enough air through that kind of filter. Okay. So when a plane's moving, it's doing that and it's doing a good job. All right. So once a plane's moving, you probably are really safe on a plane. But it also depends. There are so many variables that it's not uh, a silly thing for someone to wear a mask on a plane, especially boarding and deboarding. Okay. Now, how would you know whether it was safe to take the mask off if you want to manage your risk? You would need a CO2 detector. Okay. You can get a good one, a handheld one that's, kind of pager size, fit in your palm, Aeronet 4, for about 250, 60, $70, something like that. And if CO2 levels are 800 parts per million or less, that means your rebreathe fraction, meaning you rebreathing, inhaling someone else's exhalations, is less than 1%. Okay. At 400 parts per million, your CO2 level is what it is outside. Okay. So there's this initial curve up to 800, and then for every 400 part per million increase past 800, add another percent that you're rebreathing. So guess what? On planes during boarding and deboarding, it's typical for CO2 levels to be 2,000 to 5,000. You do the math. That means you're rebreathing a lot of sick air and you have 100 plus people. Guess what? The chances that some of those people have some sort of goo that you'd rather not have in you is pretty darn high. And so it's smart to wear a mask on a plane, especially if you're immune compromised, especially if you're immune compromised. So that's kind of the science that defies common sense, okay? And people like Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about, you can smell a fart through a mask. That proves they don't work. One problem is that gases are about 1,000 times smaller than these particles that masks absolutely stop if you have a proper mask, like an N95, KN95, KF94. You're absolutely stopping a minimum of 95% of the particles at a particular size range of zero point 0.3 microns, and all the other ones, it's even higher. So you're guaranteed, if it's properly fit, which isn't hard to do, 95% reduction in stuff coming in and out. That's the thing about a proper mask. Masks have to work under the laws of physics. They have to work. What matters is the material and the fit. If you are wearing a t-shirt over your face, t-shirts don't block a lot and they don't fit well. Surgical masks, they block a lot, but they don't fit well. An N95 blocks a lot and it fits well unless you are trying to not make it fit. I mean, it's designed to fit well. Anyways. Now, concerning why someone's even bothered by the fact that somebody else is wearing a mask anywhere. And so for these MAGA folks who are constantly barking about freedom, the freedom to say or do anything you want, unless you disagree with them. I mean, the irony of being bothered by this after all of that talk about the freedom to do whatever the heck you want, uh, it is really interesting. There's the one problem of thinking that your common sense trumps scientific data. There's that problem. That's an epistemic problem. It's a truth and knowledge problem. But then just ideologically, what they're bothered with is in conflict with their claims about freedom and all that stuff. So there's again this cognitive dissonance, I guess, of why you're bothered with somebody wearing a mask on a plane. How does that hurt you? Because you don't like it? Because you think they're dumb? It just it it just doesn't make any sense to be bothered by that. But here we are with the MAGA cult. Almost exclusively are the people who are bothered by this still. All right, to wrap this up, I want to talk about truth and knowledge. And so, what is truth? What is knowledge? And so I'll give some classic definitions. I talk about epistemology and why that's important, where your starting point is epistemologically. And so, truth, if one wanted to condense, I guess the leading theories about that, it would be when you have a coherent correspondence to reality. Now, there are more theories of truth. You have a coherence theory, a correspondence theory, a coherence correspondence theory, and others. And I'm going to go with the coherent correspondence theory because I like it. But I think it's a good one. And here the thing is a correspondence to reality. So you can make any correspondence you want. You could claim that butterflies flapping their wings in Brazil causes tornadoes in Kansas. It's not a very good correspondence. You could pretend that the chaos theory would somehow connect those things. And everything's connected in one sense, but that doesn't mean it's causal. And so there's that kind of thinking that you could have. And so that the nature of truth would be fundamentally that way. 2 plus 2 is 4, but that's by definition. Two-ness is a correspondence we make. I count 2 chickens or 2 eggs or 2 bags of M&Ms, whatever it is. And two of those and 2 of those counts up to 4. But that's by definition. It's true, but it's a different kind of truth, if you will. And yeah, there's kinds of truth. And there's levels of certainty, none of them being absolute. More on that later. Now, what is knowledge? I'll take an Aristotelian view because I like it and lots of people like it. And it's a good one. Whether it's the best one, I don't know. And to some degree, don't care. But yeah, I do. Aristotle would tell you that knowledge is when you have justified and true beliefs. So, are you justified in thinking that vitamin C will cure or help your cold? A wee little bit. You're not justified in thinking that vitamin C will cure a common cold. But there is data that says if you take vitamin C regularly when you get a cold, your cold will be a little less severe and lengthy. Severe or lengthy. Usually just less lengthy. Okay. Maybe it takes the edge off a little bit. That's it. That's it. Just is it. That's the data. So, masks, common sense would tell you that since you can smell a fart through a mask, just pretty much any mask, even a good mask like an N95, common sense tells you, oh, well, then stuff's getting through the mask because you smelled stuff through the mask. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene likes to talk about how you can still smell a fart through a mask, therefore they don't work. Not realizing the basic science that you learned in high school or should have, that gases and farts are gases, those molecules are 1,000 times smaller than the aerosols that are coming out of your pie hole that you can't see. All right. And the smallest masks don't have holes, they have pathways. So the hole in a mask, even a thin mask, down on the microscopic level, is a little windy pathway, kind of like you think of Star Wars and driving the Millennial Falcon through those trenches. Okay. That's the kind of torturous path that an aerosol particle coming out of your mouth or into the mask has to navigate. And that's why those masks work. That's one of 5 reasons, actually, why they work is literally the pathway that's available to them guarantees a collision with the mask. And if it collides with the mask, it's going to be stuck in the mask. That's why a proper mask material will filter 95 plus percent of what's going in or out. But you got to get the right mask. So justified true beliefs. You can have a belief, and either it's true or false. Your true belief is either justified or it isn't. You might have a true belief, but you haven't done the math to have it be justified. So these are problems that present epically on social media constantly in these spaces where politics and faith and science are intersecting in the hands of people who don't have any knowledge. They're armed with their common sense and their culture war mentality. And that's what we got going on here with Bridget, unfortunately. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Later, y'all.